Good afternoon, friends and colleagues and partners. My name is Dr. Samantha van Skalkwyk. I'm currently Acting Director of the Community Engagement Unit at UWC. And it's our pleasure to welcome you to the second session for our inaugural seminar series, Co-Creating Knowledge for Social Justice. And today, our guest speaker is Dr. Charles Davids from Stellenbosch University, who will be speaking about a community-based approach to substance abuse in South Africa. We're really excited for this session, Dr. Davids, and I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Ms. Pearl September Brown, who's the researcher in the Community Engagement Unit. And Pearl will introduce the speaker and facilitate our session today. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Samantha. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Indeed, it's a privilege today to me to introduce my friend, firstly, and my colleague, Dr. Charles Davids. Dr. Charles Davids is a registered psychologist and director of Center of Student Counseling and Development at the Stellenbosch University. He currently serves as president of the South African Association of Counseling and Development in Higher Education and is board chairperson of Good Hope Psychology Services. With over 2 decades of experience across higher education, public service, and community contexts, Dr. Davids has held leadership roles, including acting head of psychology at the University of the Western Cape and principal psychologist within the South African Police Services. His work is grounded in community-engaged practice with a focus on substance use, student mental health, and systemic approaches to well-being. His doctoral research explored the co-development of community-based substance abuse interventions using participatory action research, reflecting his commitment to collaborative knowledge-making and social justice. I'll just briefly read the abstract of his presentation today. This seminar examines the co-creation of knowledge as a critical practice within the scholarship of engagement, drawing on participatory action study conducted in Lambert's Bay, South Africa. In a context shaped by inequality, marginalization, and limited access to services, the study foregrounds community members as co-researchers and co-designers of a community-based substance abuse intervention program. Through iterative cycles of engagement, including needs identification, capacity strengthening, community mapping, and stakeholder collaboration, the research demonstrates how locally grounded knowledge can inform contextually relevant research. The research demonstrates how locally grounded knowledge can inform contextually relevant and sustainable responses to complex social challenges. The findings highlight the meaningful participation fosters ownership, strengthens social cohesion, and builds community capacity, while also challenging conventional expert-driven models of interventions. Engaging with Bronfman Bremer's social ecological framework, the seminar illustrates how substance abuse is embedded within interconnected systems of poverty, inequality, and social dislocation, requiring multi-level collaborative responses. The study further reflects on the tensions inherent in co-creation knowledge, including power dynamics, competing agendas, and the practical complexities of participatory work. Positioned within post-apartheid South Africa, the seminar argues that universities have an ethical and transformative role in facilitating engaged scholarship that centers community voice, disrupt knowledge hierarchies, and advances social justice. It offers critical insights for scholars and practitioners seeking to build equitable partnership and co-produce knowledge that leads to meaningful, sustained change. Charles, it's over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pearl. If I listen to the abstract, I wonder, when did I write that? So I'm also getting, I love being in the room where everybody sits and we engage in that format. So I think after COVID, we're all online with all of these things. Yeah, so I cannot now go from the energy that's in the room, but let's see how we go through it. I'm also not going to stick completely to what, almost what the study is, but I want to make certain assumptions around, especially looking at the, co-creating knowledge for social justice and what I think, universities and or higher education institutions, what our role really is and should be, and what are we doing, and I hope that some of the things that we can engage with. We can move on, Paul. So yeah, so I also want to open with this kind of statement saying that communities are not just participants in the research processes. They genuinely, and we should genuinely start seeing them as co-creators of knowledge, because communities are not just open spaces waiting for expertise to come in. I think they are sites of knowledge, resilience, and possibility that already exists within communities, because I think many of our communities function in any way without any, experts or different kind of expertise within that spaces. Can move on. So, but let me also just say to you, because I think one must always start with the kind of thing, and I think when I do research, is the importance of research, the researcher positionality. But even for me in presentations, I think we should state up front, this is where we come from, because we look at all things that we do, we look through a particular lens in that. So our training, our life experiences, and even personal values are the main factors influencing our choice for epistemological perspectives. And therefore, everything that we do, whether it's practitioners or researchers, we should always keep that in mind. So based on that, as a community psychologist, and I see myself as that, but also as an activist schooled in the Marxist and socialist thinking, I view the world through a systems lens, and which I was also using in the PhD study. And therefore, I think naturally to that kind of ecological systems theory and a participatory action research was therefore used as a methodology within it. And most of the time in all the studies that I do or embark on, that would be the lens that I look things through, and even my understanding when I are partaking in any kind of discussions or around particular issues. Thanks, Paul. So, and for me, why does that matter if we're speaking about substance abuse? It's because we cannot separate substance abuse from the broader questions of inequality, social exclusion, unemployment, trauma, and historical marginalization. And if we look at our structure of our country, communities are still literally, based according to that structural marginalization that we saw. And we can see in terms of resources flowing to various parts of it. If we just look at Cape Town in itself, and we will see over the next couple of months, a lot of those debates, because we're moving towards the local government election, there will be many debates that we're speaking about the two cities within one. And for me, in many South African communities, this substance use develops within environments that was shaped by. So, now I must get my train of thought back. But it's so we still, the communities are still faced with this structural and historical disadvantage, where there's limited access to any support services that we give. Therefore, I think this presentation is also then positioned substance abuse not only as a health issue, but also as a social justice concern requiring collaborative and systemic approaches and responses that we have to utilize. Thanks, Paul. So the core argument really, in my view, is that substance abuse has always been seen as an individual behavior issue historically. And therefore, traditional approaches often focus only on pathology or the personal responsibility of an individual person suffering from abuse, from misusing as well. However, in my view, it is a structurally and socially produced phenomenon, and especially in our South African context. And I don't want to go much into it, but even the kind of historical nature with under apartheid and how substances was used especially in our historically Black communities around, around the divide and rule campaigns that government had. And therefore, the research argues that substance abuse is deeply connected to community conditions, the social systems, and the lived realities that people face. And understanding these broader influences allows us for more contextually and relevant and also much more sustainable intervention strategies that we then employ. Next. So I do think within the literature and scholarship within addiction field that it shifted from the traditional expert-driven, where we need to have a much more engaged, co-created with communities. However, if we look at funding, and especially from a social development perspective, Department of Social Development perspective, there's not a lot of that kind of co-created engagement with communities, and they still look for that expert-driven within even the NPOs that they fund within those communities. But in the research areas, it's already started to shift dramatically. Thanks, Will. So just to say that where the study was done, it was done in Lambert's Bay. It was used participatory action research, and Lambert's Bay is basically a fishing community with many socioeconomic challenges. There's high levels of inequality and marginalization. There's substance use intertwined with poverty and social dislocation that we find. But there's also limited access to sustained psychosocial support services within that we find in many rural areas. And the aim really was in the community to look at the communities, not necessarily to look at what the intervention is, but also what is the community's participation in co-developing this intervention that we eventually got to. Next. But using participatory action research and ethics within, the research ethics that we have to follow according to guidelines of how we do research and things. But there's also, when we do participatory action research, there always sits different kind of ethical stuff, because the community should give what the ethical rules of engagement are, and not necessarily university higher degrees committee. So ethics was equally central throughout the process, and at each stage it also changes depending what the conversation is, and because it's co-partners and not an expert coming in to do research. And therefore in community engaged work, ethics extends beyond the formal institutional approval. It involves building trust, respect, dignity, ensuring psychological safety, and remaining accountable to the communities that's involved within the process. But it also means avoiding extractive practices where communities contribute knowledge without benefiting from the outcomes of the studies that we do. And I definitely experienced it throughout the process, how even the ethics in the proposal that went into higher degrees, that changed completely every cycle that we engage with within the community context. Next. So also universities, for me, is not neutral spaces in knowledge production. And therefore, I think engaged scholarship challenges extractive research traditions that we became used to. And I certainly remember, even as a first-year student, most of the studies, people would go into communities, extract knowledge, and then move on. But we must realize that communities must be partners rather than subjects of a research process, and that knowledge co-creation contributes to the decolonial and socially just practices within our spaces. And for me, also that sustainable partnerships requires reciprocity, trust, and accountability. And therefore, it should be. However, I need to state up front as well, if we go in this direction, even just using participatory action research, it also means there's a lengthier period of how long that research process will unfold within communities if we use them as co-creation, equal partners within that process. Next. So why Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory? Because it helps explain how individual behavior and well-being are shaped by multiple connected systems, not by personal choice alone, that how we used to treat addiction, areas around addiction. But it also allows the study to locate substance use and well-being within the interaction of those kind of systems, but not only use it as a theoretical understanding and formulation, but also to make sure that when one get to interventions initially, that there should be interventions on all the systems and how that have impact on one another.
Sanako, can you just put on silent, please? Thanks.
The next slide, Tom. So when using participating, it shifts the role of community members from passive participants to active contributors in the research process. It also values the lived experience as legitimate from form of knowledge, but it also creates opportunities for reflection, dialogue, ownership, but also even practical social interaction in terms of how it, and I'll speak later about how that eventually played out within the process itself. Next. And the process normally is that we develop a plan, there's an action, there's observation and reflection, and the cycle will continue. In this setting, there was a cycle 1 that was a needs assessment kind of thing through nominal groups. There was community training in cycle 2, community mapping and transect walk in cycle 3. And in cycle 4, there was community steering committee feedback. And I'll explain later how all of that worked. Next. So in cycle 1, it was, now remember initially one went in and said that, after these needs assessment, we will know what the needs of the communities and then develop a plan and a program. However, the community could identify needs, but when we had a discussion about the data that we got, because now I have to sit with community members, and in this case, it was always a kind of steering committee that was, voted on in a community meeting. They will be the steering committee. One realized that there was limited understanding of concepts, and therefore insights and minus knowledge, knowing and knowledge doesn't necessarily equal understanding. Because knowing is the passive collection of facts and information, and understanding is the active process then of grasping how and why those facts connect, and being able to apply them in the real world scenarios. For example, community members through this first cycle could easily say we need to have prevention programs in place. But when we had discussions and I asked, okay, so what is a prevention? What would be seen as a prevention in terms of that? They couldn't articulate what that exactly means. And then one realized at that point, okay, so one cannot move forward to start looking at what the intervention is if the community doesn't have the understanding of what that means. And therefore, they cannot be co-creators and seeing as being equal partners. And therefore, you can go to the next slide, Paul. And therefore, the second cycle, which wasn't part of the beginning of the thing, was then introduced in terms of capacity building for community members. And what we then did, so the community engagement unit at UWC at the time was quite involved in the substance abuse training that we did for lay counselors over many years. It's normally an 8-month program of about 2 days per month. What then happened, but right in the beginning of when we implemented that program, we also developed a 4-day training program that was actually geared for teachers to work in schools. I looked at that program and then tweaked it to be able to deal with community. And we had many of those kind of trainings within the community to understand what all of those kind of things mean. And because of this training, the capacity, and because it's also accredited courses, the community got the certification offered through UWC. And therefore, quite an important finding from the cycle 2 was that that participation after this deepened when community members were provided with opportunities for learning, but also reflection on that learning then. And the training sessions definitely improved the confidence of community members in terms of their participation within the process, their understanding, and the ability of participants to contribute meaningfully to discussions and the planning going forward. But this demonstrated that empowerment is connected to both inclusion and access to knowledge. And therefore, the transformative thing through the cycle 2 was that participation improves when knowledge equals understanding in terms of how one can then roll things out. Next. So the cycle 3 was literally a transect walk. So we did, so the community got together, we sat down and we basically mapped out how it is that we're going to walk through the community, and we were then going to take pictures of the communities, and there was 3 questions that they needed to answer: what we have in the community, what it is that we would like to see in the community, and what is also the problem of substance abuse in the community. And just in the cycle to say to you that how the ethical things and how the cycles change while you're just working on it. While we were working, one of the first streets we went down, so they took pictures of one of the houses that sells illegal drugs, and opposite the house there's a unfinished building, which is supposed to be a church, but it's still in construction, but it was standing empty for years. So a lot of times people would buy drugs at the house and then go opposite the road to use it within this building. And we took pictures there, and the idea was that as community members walk through the community, take pictures, they would also interview community members on particular things. But while we were at this first site, the drug lord came out and confronted people around what they're doing. I personally had to step in and say, no, we're taking pictures of empty buildings because we want to tell municipality they must do something about it. But on the spot, while we were standing there, then we needed to have, because then safety became a concern, because I don't stay in the community. I'm there and for a few days or weeks at a time and then leave. But they have to stay. And therefore, we stopped the interview processes. And therefore, we needed to add another cycle after the transect walk. But what happened through it in terms of what this community saw, the real condition of substance, the issue of substance abuse within the community. And we realized that you can stay in the community, be aware of the issue in the community, but not the extent of it. And while we were walking, because if you stay in the community, you start walking past even drug dens and things, and you don't see it anymore because it becomes part of our lived reality. And community members, a lot that was on the transect walk, all said at the end that, well, they knew about it, but it was never this visible to them, and the magnitude of the problem, they didn't realize the magnitude of the problem. For example, Lambert's Bay was a community built for just about 10,000 people, but we found at the time 25 illegal drug houses within a small community like that. And therefore, for me, the transformative issue for me through this cycle was this whole thing that community members started to think systems in a systems way, because remember, with the capacity building, except for the stuff around understanding substance abuse and all of that, we also did some work on what is systems and systems thinking and what is that about. So I could see in the transect how they started thinking like that when they took pictures and why they took it, to look at what system that needs to talk to. And therefore, the linking of poverty, crime, and substance use then came from the community participants, actually. Next. So the cycle 4 was introduced because the interviews didn't happen in cycle 3, where there was a stakeholder engagement where a lot of stakeholders were invited to the community hall, from government departments to community organizations, and churches and ordinary people within it. And the findings of cycle 3 was then presented to the community members within the space, and then they formed circles and the people who did the TransEquity facilitated those kind of circles, and they could give input on that. So that immediately made that stakeholders created solutions together in terms of what it could look like. They also gave in that engagement, and it was a full day program. They could say this is the program model where it started looking at prevention, early intervention, treatment, and aftercare. But they made that decision to do it in that way because within the National Drug Master Plan, it speaks about those, the prevention, early intervention, treatment, and aftercare, and they wanted to link it to that. But importantly for me, that the stakeholders could clearly identify the ecological framework within it, what of the interventions should be around, the kind of mesosystem, which is the individual, and then the mesosystems, the family, community, and, they could identify what interventions to talk to, what kind of, to which system, but how it can have ripple effects to the other. Next. So for me, what worked in this whole study was the ownership, the relevance, and the collaboration between myself going into a community, but the ownership was definitely at the community level. The relevance of what the intervention will look like eventually came from the community, and the collaboration between not only myself as a researcher coming into the community, but also between different organizations and stakeholders within the community, because beyond the study, it improved those kind of relations within that community as well. Next. The challenges out of all of this, that participatory work is often emotionally demanding and time intensive. Remember, I stay in Cape Town. I had to drive about 240 kilometers every time to go to the research site. But however, even before starting doing the substance abuse work, I was already working within the community on different other projects for 8 years before. And then, because and the entry made it quite easily, but also the kind of emotionally demanding things, because a lot of community also know that you were psychologists as well. And some of the things that gets evoked while we're busy with that. And remember, we normally have, we put in our ethical documents to higher degrees that if the people need counseling, people will receive it. But in a community like that, there's no, where do we refer them to? And we needed to look at all of those kind of things. And I needed to spend time working with that. And at points taking students, postgrad students there when I go down to actually offer that kind of service. The other part of that, the demandingness of it was also about how you vacillate between being a researcher, but also participant within the space. And how the community can easily say no, but because there was times when they said to me, when we needed to look at, for example, when it came to data collection, they would say to me at times, no, you go and do it because you understand how we have to do it. And one needed to keep reminding them that they co-creators of this and we have to do data analysis together. So I spent days on end sitting and talking through with community members, looking at how we do a lot of this qualitative analysis in terms of these things. Secondly, there's a lot of obviously resource limitations and competing stakeholder expectation, which affect continuity and even in terms of implementation. Because remember how volatile discussions started happening, especially even when we had the stakeholder, because now suddenly we're saying, but there's 25 illegal drug houses, SAPS is in the room. And we're saying there's only 2 entry points into Lambert's Bay. So how is it that drugs come in terms, because to be the supply and demand side of it, which is not the community responsibility, that becomes law enforcement responsibility, and how do one hold them accountable for those kind of things, and what does the police intelligence look like and things. So a lot of competing expectations in terms of where we want to see it from community and also government departments, and one needed to in those spaces facilitate that kind of processes. Then the power dynamics between institutions, professionals, and community members, and this can influence whose voices are prioritized a lot of times. For example, so when we were speaking about kind of preventative work, I mean, the Western Cape Education Department's view on NGOs working within the school during school hours, or the psychologists and social workers of the education department, you know, then it became a fight about who gets the statistics, because they need to have that stats and things. So it was an interesting dynamic and discussion, but I was doing a PhD study, but at the same time also looking at how fundamentally in the community the different kind of different levels would work very differently with one another. And therefore, the tension really that sat with me throughout that co-creation is extremely powerful, but also extremely messy. And therefore, even the time that they say that you must finish your PhD in 5 years, that will never happen if we do, participatory action research within community, if we do it in the way we should. And that's why the PhD also took just longer than 5 years. Next. So for me, a critical insight really is that inclusion does not equal power sharing, because I've realized very quickly that, you know, because of the distance, I needed to sometimes send things through that people had to read through before one get there. But then it became so, who has access to email? And if I send it somewhere, that it needs to be printed and given to people. And a lot of times, what happened when I got to the community, not everybody received the documents, and then we had to postpone it so that they can receive the documentation, read it first, and then have it. So they were included in terms of it, but then it means that, different resource constraints that, and therefore doesn't, definitely inclusion does not equal power sharing. But also inviting marginalized groups into existing spaces can a lot of times look like tokenism. And for me, therefore, it's not the same as giving them genuine decision-making authority or resources to be able to do things. So we surely had to look at differently how we disseminate information and resources within the community, but also in terms of how important it is that every voice matters. And there was quite a lot of in the qualitative feedback that people spoke about this kind of thing, how this process felt very different to them than other processes that they went through before, because they got the opportunity and they felt that their voices mattered and their opinions and decisions that they were part of it. And therefore, true power sharing requires altering structural hierarchy. So underrepresented individuals can actively drive policy, strategy, and leadership. But here's the thing. All our research is from higher education institutions within universities. If we look at structures within university itself, how that hierarchy and the authority in terms of decision-making is so entrenched within higher education, but we then expect our researchers that's then schooled within that higher education institution to be able to do the opposite when they're in communities. And therefore, we should also challenge the whole kind of things around how we do things within our own institutions as well. Next. So the role of universities is that, we have a responsibility to move beyond extractive models of research where communities are simply sites of data collection. There should be engaged scholarship, and it requires long-term relationships, ethical accountability, and reciprocal knowledge exchange. And why I'm saying long-term relationship, because as I said, it took 8 years to get to the point of starting the PhD study, working in that community, taking students through the community psychology module, actually, for the honor students, taking them to the community, working through it, for about 8 years, and then this process started. So that relationship building becomes quite important. Therefore, I keep on saying Lambert's Bay is now for me a second home almost, because of the emotional connection to the community. But it also involves challenging traditional assumptions about expertise and recognizing that community knowledge is valuable and extremely legitimate. We can't go in as well and thinking that there's no work being done in the community, because there surely is. A lot of times in community, those kind of interventions that they already have in place, it's just not coordinated in a particular kind of way. Next. So at its core, engagement in practice really speaks about engaged scholarship, is about relationship, recognition, and shared humanity. It acknowledges that sustainable social change is rarely achieved through expert-driven solutions alone. And instead transformation then becomes possible when universities and communities learn with one another, co-create knowledge, and collectively imagine more just and inclusive futures. We as universities have an ethical responsibility, and I think we exist and we should be in service of society. But a lot of research we do is not in service of society. It is to complete a degree. And we have to start rethinking how we look at what that's in service to society actually means. Next. So this in terms of a social justice lens, to keep in line with the seminar series that the CEU is running. So engaged scholarship, when grounded in social justice, it challenges universities to rethink both knowledge and power. It asks of our institutions not only to study inequality, but to confront the ways in which higher education itself may reproduce exclusion. And at its best, the scholarship of engagement, I think, creates spaces where communities are recognized with dignity, represented with authenticity, and included in the redistribution of knowledge, opportunity, and social responsibility. Next. So the impact of the study that we embarked on in Lambert's Bay, the process strengthened relationship between stakeholders, as I mentioned earlier, and it encouraged a stronger sense of shared ownership, because there's genuinely a feeling of ownership of what we did. Participants reported greater awareness of the complexity of substance abuse within their own community. And the intervention process also contributed to the capacity building and increased collaboration among local role players, as I said before. And it assisted with resources within the community. For example, when we started the study, nobody received funding to do substance abuse treatment within it. While we were busy with the process through the cycles, the NPO that was central that we worked with started receiving funding from DSD. So already the process started while we were still busy with the study. So there was already a huge impact. And while the study was busy, there's a lot of the support groups started, the inter-referral between the health clinic, the school, the NPOs, the churches, and all of those kind of things started to happen while we were still going through the study. Right. Next. So the key takeaways here is that at its heart, engaged scholarship is about recognizing that communities are not merely sites where knowledge is applied, but spaces where knowledge already exists. And that sustainable transformation becomes possible when universities intentionally create partnerships grounded in humility, reciprocity, and shared humanity. And in this process, engagement shifts from institutional outreach to collective co-creation, where communities are not spoken for, but actively shape the knowledge, the solutions, and futures that emerge from the engagement. Next. Communities also hold valuable forms of knowledge, often overlooked within traditional academic approaches. And our co-created interventions are more likely to be contextually relevant, sustainable, and empowering. Because I often get people say, because of the research that this or that professor is doing, they're the expert in a particular field of study. But I always say that, but they don't live in that communities. They have a theoretical understanding, but not a lived reality of the community members, and therefore the importance of the co-creation. An engaged scholarship requires, as I was saying, the humility, reciprocity, and the willingness to share the power. And that social justice work begins when communities are recognized not as problems to solve, but as partners in the transformation process. Next. That's it. So I think I'll be open for some engagement because I now talked a lot. Thanks, Will.
Thank you so much, Dr. Davids. Wow, that's quite an amazing study. When you said the part about co-creation is messy, I just gave a bit of a giggle. I must commend you, an amazing study. And you really went all the way. I mean, I don't want to take much. I mean, I've got lots of questions, but I can ask you that again. But I just want to ask you the one question. At what stage does the community start co-creating with you as a researcher doing this research study?
Listen, remember, even when writing the proposal for the PhD, they were part of that. So, because when we needed to, write the proposal to go in for higher degrees and things, so the conceptualization of it started with the community already. At that point, not the entire community as it went through the thing, but it was there was because of the previous work that we've done, there was already a committee formed because of the other work that we did, and in that committee, the joint proposal writing, and I was sent back all the time to rephrasing, to rewrite it before it could go even for ethical clearance through higher degrees.
Thank you, Charles. So the floor is open for any questions. We've got about 15 minutes left for any questions or comments. Can you just raise your hand? Yes, please go ahead, Lorenza.
I just want to say thank you for this valuable research share. The seminar helped me a lot with my own research, and I think that is the motive for me to have engaged because of the essay context that I also share with you in my research. And it just surfaced for me the importance again for this relevance to have this co-creating. What does it mean? And what you are so engaged in your research, but how do you formulate so eloquently? What does it mean? And that was helpful for me. Thank you so much. I will have to go and think about it, of course, but that stood out for me. Thanks.
But Lorenza, please, if there's any other future conversation you want to have about it, please feel free to reach out.
I would love to. I definitely made a note of your access, how to access you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is there any other questions or comments? I'm not currently seeing any hands up.
I see Samantha's hand is up.
Samantha, there we go. Hi, Samantha.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Davids, for a great presentation. There's so much there, but I wanted to ask today about the photographs when you were going with the community, capturing the landscape, mapping the landscape. It just sounded really rich in terms of visually making sense. In a real grounded, embodied way of the traumas that are playing out in the communities. And I was wondering if you used those photographs in any way or documented them in any way through the research or after the research, perhaps as a academic resource, but also as contributing to the resources offered for the communities. Thank you.
Yeah. So yes, the photographs is the community owns it, because the depository was put together and the community actually have it. And because remember, at the end, when you have to write up all the things of the study, you don't use the entire, you don't use all the pictures as well, because there was a lot taken. But we also had to sit, when we started looking at an analysis and which pictures to speak to what, the community decided what will be in the final thesis and what it is that they keep as a depository to that. Because remember, they took also pictures of all the drug houses, illegal drug houses and legal ones. I mean, the alcohol outlets that's legal, I mean, your Tops and all of those places, right? Because remember those and the sensitivity that those pictures also become can become part of police investigations. So we needed to also talk about in that space where the stakeholders, where police were also present to looking at, okay, so how is this will be used? But the community was clear that they wanted the police to know. We know all this, you're not doing anything about it, because that's part of the intervention, the supply and demand kind of part, which should be a law enforcement engagement with it. So now the community can hold them accountable in terms of that, because we've agreed in a certain way, you were part of that conversation, is that this supply and demand is part of the intervention. It's not only about the psychosocial responses that we must have, but also what on the supply and demand part of it. So it was a kind of tricky thing. And then also because, I mean, I was asked even, but you have pictures in here by my supervisor. You have pictures in here that has people's faces identifiable. But people gave consent, no, we want you to have our faces in there. Because there was also, I mean, people that were standing on street corners though, because they wanted to portray the unemployment and how that leads to sometimes the addiction as well. For those people, it was, no, our pictures should be there, because maybe you're going to present other places. Maybe we get job offers because you have it. And they, wow. But also they came into when we had the community meetings, it's not only because the community meetings were open for everyone when we presented it. And it was very interesting how the people that normally stands on the street corner came to that community meetings and participated actually quite actively in it as well. And even the ones that was addicted at the time came there because they said, well, I can give input, but I also can receive help. So it was a very interesting engagement, actually.
Wow, thank you so much. And I love this around the power of pictures and also challenging normative benchmarks of ethics, the confidentiality and so on, because Absolutely. The power of having the real person behind that story is about voice, is about visibility. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, Samantha. Pauline, I see your hand. Are you on mute? Just unmute yourself. I think you're still muted.
I have done so.
There we go. Hi.
I'd like to thank you, Doctor, for the very good presentation. It was quite good and insightful. It has helped me a lot towards my PhD studies. I've really learned a lot, and a lot of questions have been answered. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Faldila, you might go ahead.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody.
You may go ahead, Faldila.
Good afternoon, everybody. Dr. Shaw, thank you so much. I actually had a community engagement workshop that ended on Sunday, and we were tasked with community mapping and also choosing a subject that you're going to focus your community mapping on. And because we live in communities that some of us will focus on poverty and like the feeding schemes in the community, my focus is going to be on the community of the people that we always look at substance abuse as a negative thing, but we don't look at these, people forming their own communities and looking after the communities and looking out for themselves. And this has given me basically some pointers to actually work on, which is going to make my task a bit easier. So I just want to, I think this couldn't come at a better time. So it's just broadened my, in terms of looking at community mapping in a different way, and also the focus on substance abuse and how it's affecting our communities, but also to appreciate that this is also human beings and they're also looking out for each other's safety. Whether if you go with a feeding scheme into these little areas where the people are based, they would often, when one of the neighbors are not there, often ask, can I have another, for a friend of mine? So within our communities, these people, the drug users, also form their own communities, and sometimes there's positives that come out of that. They do celebrate each other also if the one, goes into rehabilitation center and, rehabilitates you. Well, yeah, if you ask, where's this one, where's that one? No, you must help. He turned out, he's motivating us also. And sometimes this is the forgotten community in our societies. And I was actually reconsidering, should I do it on the communities of, substance abuse and maybe focus on something else. But this has just given me now, the push to do that. So I thank you for this insightful presentation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Saldila.
Hi, Megan, you might go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Sorry, my mic. Thank you so much,
Yes, we
Dr.
can.
Alex. That was really, really insightful. I enjoyed the presentation. I don't know if it's a question or more of a comment, but I really enjoyed the picture you painted of the community being kind of almost mobilized, like you're saying they want their pictures taken, they want change, they are wanting, because I think there's this preconceived idea that, communities are lazy or they are just not doing anything with the assets presented to them. I think this study shows like communities are wanting to, and maybe this is my question, following this study, how do we facilitate or catalyze communities making change at a systemic level? They've clearly got the desire, the motivation, they're wanting change, but it seems like they feel stuck. What are your thoughts?
Megan, I think it's about, I think in all communities, communities want to do things. I mean, we get that often. The difficulty a lot of times is that because we get stuck living, I mean, if you look at it, the simple thing that they said around that, yeah, they knew there was people were using substances in the community, but they never knew the magnitude, even if they walk the streets on a daily basis. And because we live in that community, we almost don't start seeing certain things. And I think what then happens when we create the opportunity where there's concerted effort and time and space created for that, then people actually do rally together and find a common kind of goal towards that. Because you find in many communities, you will have an individual doing things in the next street, somebody is doing, but they don't even know one another. And I think when we create the spaces to bring all of those kind of things together, and you will find that there is actually then we create a possibility of tomorrow and not a difficulty of it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is there any other questions? I think we can take one more question. I'll just read what is in the chat from Jamie Lee. Brilliant. From Tuli, thank you, Doc, for such an inspiring, insightful presentation. I'm empowered. Bianca Daniels, thank you, Dr. Davids, for the session. It was very informative. From Damaris Kivitz, thank you, Doc. You stayed true to the community of Lambert's Bay. So accurate to say Lambert's Bay became home to us. Then Louisa, thank you, Dr. Davids, especially for reminding us that community members are the experts of the lived reality, not the researchers. So is there a last question from anybody before we close? Nathan, you may go ahead.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, Nathan, you may go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Davids. Thank you so much for your insightful presentation. It definitely gave me some pointers as to how to approach a specific project that I'm busy working on. I just had a separate question as well. Seeing that. Gambling, for example, is becoming one of the fastest growing forms of addictive behavior in our communities. Do you think that community-based prevention approaches, should begin to address behavioral addictions alongside substance abuse? Thanks.
Absolutely, Nathan. I'm sure at all your institutions you will receive an invite to a webinar for the 23rd of this month that SASEP, the South African Senior Student Affairs Professionals, that's our deans and DVCs of students at that organization. We're hosting it at Stellenbosch, where we speak about gambling in higher education, because our students are obviously doing it more within the psychological circles. Within the next ICD, there's a new diagnosis we're looking at in terms of the gaming addiction, because it's also what we find. There's now links between gaming addiction of earlier to other forms of addiction later. So it's definitely an issue that we start seeing it in our student populations across the country. And certainly in communities. I was in a community in Nova Park a few months ago where somebody said to me, it's a pastor, and he says that he's giving gangsters 5 Rand or 10 Rand, and they WhatsApp him and he sends it to them to do this gaming and Hollywood bets. Well, Hollywood bets, that is, right? And I was asking him, as a pastor, how can you do it? He says, well, I give them the 5 Rand or 10 Rand, keeps them busy the whole day, and there's no shooting in the community. So, I mean, community starting to find a way of how it works, but it's certainly the online gambling and even gaming itself. So we must be much more careful around our children. I mean, a lot of kids early on play the whole kind of thing around gaming, and how that will eventually go into gambling and addiction. So there's a huge kind of thing for that. So absolutely, Nathan, you're spot on.
Well, thank you so much for today. We really do appreciate it. I mean, since I know you as a student, you've always been very engaged and active in communities, and that was a beautiful presentation. I know that you're supposed to catch a flight soon, so we will end it right here. But if any of you want to contact Charles and you don't have his contact details, please contact the Community Engagement Unit. And Charles, if it's okay with you, we can pass on your email address. Is that fine?
Oh, well,
And
thanks.
so, brilliant. And so our next seminar series will be at the end of July, and everybody who has been here today will receive an invite to attend again. But if any of you are interested in showcasing the work that you're doing, engaged work that you're doing, please contact Community Engagement at ceu@uwc.ac.za for any of our future seminars. Charles, thank you so much again. Is there any last remarks that you want to make before you head off?
No, just thank you for the opportunity, and yeah, it was lovely to engage with my colleagues at UWC again.
It was lovely to have you at UWC again. Thank you very much, colleagues. Take care. Charles, drive safely to the airport, and yeah, wherever you are going, I know you have to head off soon. Thank you so much, Charles. Take care.
Thank you. All the best. Bye.